I would like to welcome all of you to Are Your Teams Underperforming? There's been a great deal of interest. We've had a lot of back and forth with participants and potential participants who may be showing up, and it's a hot topic. So I'd like to share, I'm Julie Johnson, so I'm the founder and the director of Julie Johnson Consulting, or we lovingly call it JJC. So basically, if it concerns coaching, count me in. So we offer various coaching services. As you can see, we have a network of over 100 coaches, senior executive coaches and team coaches spread around the world. And we choose our coaches carefully. We are big on quality and making a difference. And so it's not easy to get into the network, but it's wonderful work that they receive. So here are 4 services that we offer. There are a few more, but these are the key ones. So executive coaching with the most senior people in organizations. We also offer a Hogan team alignment experience, and also team coaching, which is that journey that's spread over time. And we have a Leader as Coach program that has CCE credits for it. We've just gained that, and we're really excited about that. It's a 9-month experience that really gets senior leaders to develop a coaching leadership style. Okay, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. And you know how often you read off of a text and you have this little mini bio and you read that out. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to look at it and use it for inspiration. So if I look at Michelle and Peter, they both have years of experience. So Michelle has 30, Peter has 25. So Michelle is really passionate about creating positive change. So she wants to make a difference. And I imagine she just doesn't take on work where it doesn't make a difference, which is a JJC mantra as well. She works on individual, team, and organizational effectiveness. She has a bunch of, this is my way of clumping it together, a bunch of top certifications. And she is a team coaching supervisor. Now, there are not many team coaching supervisors out there yet, as team coaching is on the rise. And this role is to create a safe space for team coaches to review their practice. So she's also a trainer, and she's a sought-after speaker. She's speaking, I believe, Michelle, you're speaking at the next ICF conference in California. Is that correct?
I am, yes, on team coaching and change.
Yeah, wonderful. And she was honored with the ICF Prism Award in 2022. Now, in coaching world, this is a really revered award. And if I sum it up, I think of the words mover and shaker. When she steps in the room, things start happening. So Peter, with his 8,000 plus hours of coaching, I know Peter as one who is frequently flying around the world to work with Exco teams all over the place. He's a former CEO, and he's a senior faculty member at Team Coaching International. So he helps new team coaches get up and running. And he serves as a global subject matter expert. In fact, he took the lead with ICF when they developed their first set of team coaching competencies. So that's really exciting. So I'd like to welcome both presenters, and why don't we take a look at what our learning objectives are today. So this is what we're going to look at. What is team coaching really? And we'll look at it compared to different kinds of team activities, because some people think, oh, that's team coaching, but it's not, it's something else. Team building, team coaching, for example, are 2 different things. So we'll look at some of the most common challenges that teams face today. There's going to be a couple of real life case studies and the ROI of team coaching, like, can you get your money's worth plus more? I have a request to start AI Companion.
Yeah.
Shall I?
Why not? Or do you?
All right.
So I think it's okay to get something afterwards. Yeah.
All right, let's do that. Now we're getting into the meat of things. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle. Can you describe what systemic team coaching is?
For sure. Thank you so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and really looking forward to the conversation with Peter, Julie, and yourselves. And systemic team coaching, which most of us are trained in, is really about working with the entire team as one system. It's working with them as the client. And we want to do that versus working with each individual and putting data together, because the team interacts in different ways together. Also really important is helping them improve their collective performance and how they work together both now and in the future. And the third critical component is ensuring that we have stakeholder feedback, because we want to make sure that they're working with them in service of the business goals. So that's systemic team coaching, basically.
Yeah, super. So Peter, how does team coaching differ from other team modalities?
Well, that's the word modalities that we used. I was invited together with, I think, 14 other people back in,
Okay.
yeah,
How about if we go back to our PowerPoint? I
yeah.
think that might be nice
We
for
can
this
do that.
page.
So there was a discussion in 2018, ICF started to take a look at, do we need, to define core competences for team coaching as we have done for individual coaching. So ICF gathered a lot of people to do some research the first years, 2018, 2019, on what's written in the books about team coaching and how can we codify what it is and when it comes to the competences. In 2020, there was a group of people gathered to sort of work this material and try to understand, are we going to make a separate set of conductives of competences, or do we want to make additions to the current core competences for individual coaching? And I was invited to that group with a lot of American and English academics, a lot of experienced team coaches, and together we took a look at what do we mean when we talk about team development? And there was a lot of views on what it was. We also hear that from many of our clients that, yeah, we've been doing some team development. We've been rafting together and we've been climbing mountains and we've been doing funny things. And we know it's fun for some of us. On the other side of that spectrum is real deep team coaching that goes over time, that creates a partnership between a coach and a team, and that has clear sustainability and performance in mind all the time. It's integral in its way of working around conflicts and things. And the experts and the ownership is the team who's the owner of the whole process. They're the owner of the agenda and of the results. So ICF decided to create this matrix, as you can see, because there's many team development, many modalities that it was called. So team building, short things that you can do to come together. Maybe you start up a team, you do some exercises together, into putting the whole into training around certain skills or experiences, or team consulting, where people come in and tell teams what to do. Even mentoring, you can have a senior team mentoring a junior team in an organization, and then facilitation to help a team come through a strategy process or so until you come to team coaching, which is a much deeper and wider way of working. So what we're focusing on today is the team coaching process, which is the more deeper and more profound, I would say, amongst the other ones. And all of these are done by team coaches, by team leaders and teams out there. But we see the leverage effect of team coaching. It affects a whole organization if we start coaching the top team, for instance. I'm currently with a team in Stockholm, Sweden. We're on a lunch break, so we've walked them through this, and they've described to us what they have done so far and what results have come out of that. So we're really in the middle of everything now.
Super. I think it would be really interesting, before we show some of the common team challenges that are suitable for team coaching, let's hear from the audience here. So would you please, in the chat, enter some challenges where you think, yes, this is a challenge I've seen a team have, and team coaching would be really suitable.
Lack of role clarification and accountability, very common.
Yeah, go ahead and read them out, Peter, because they don't come into my screen with the AI thing.
So lack of role clarification and accountability, Jane addresses, and Indranil says newly formed teams, organizational change. We've seen a biggie. Julie and I, Michelle, we went with a company who had 110,000 people that had to reapply for their jobs. That creates a multitude of new teams. So from the small teams to the big organizations. Yeah, what else?
Not only newly formed teams, but also when team membership changes in the
Yeah,
teams. Normal, right?
Yes.
Because it's a living system like everything else.
neurodiversity in teams. Pauline, give us some more words to that.
Please.
Can we just unmute? Maybe that's easier than typing.
Sure.
Yeah, so I work in the neurodiversity space. I'm an ADHD coach, and it's yeah, so we're training people in organizations what neurodiversity is and how it shows up in teams and how it creates communication issues and how people tend to think they know what it means, but then when we don't talk about it, actually we're just assuming. So I think that's a big factor that plays a role in team. And I'm training to become a team coach right now. So for me, that I want that to be my niche. So yeah, that sums it up
Oh,
for
it's
me.
wonderful. And it is a growing niche and a much needed one, to help people understand how it impacts communication issues and
Yeah.
just team dynamics as a whole, for sure.
And assumption is a key word. That's what's happening in all teams. Assumption is about each other's and the meaning behind words and things. So that's really interesting. Shadow relationship that can derail below the surface. Yeah, tell us more, Nick.
Hi, Peter. I think human systems are far more complex than we, as consultants and observers and coaches, are able to really fully both understand and experience. So I think within a team, there are all sorts of psychodynamic, emotional transferences going on all the time. And I think I find it extremely difficult to try and make sense. And I think we make sense at one level, but there's another lot of sense making going on at a deeper level. And it's, I've done team development things and team activities where later I've discovered, two of the members of the team were in a relationship, which was never made public, and I didn't know that at the time. We often hear in teams that somebody's been promoted out of the team, but somebody else didn't get the job, and they're now feeling disaffected, but they don't necessarily show that, but it's felt. So there are all sorts of circumstances where I think that the surface features can be misleading to the deeper dynamics that are truly going on.
That's so interesting. This team I'm working with today, I asked them why they are sitting where they are sitting. And some of these relations just came forward that nobody knew about. And this is really interesting, what's hidden behind and what assumptions that create. Cool. What else? Teams and organizations stuck in conflicts. Yes, of course. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we can almost tell you with certainty that every single team will have conflict and need to work on how to manage conflict productively. So conflict's a good thing. It leads to creativity and innovation. The challenge is many of us aren't skilled at how do we surface conflict in productive ways in order to get there. And that can be due to cultural issues as well. I've got a team right now where it's a global team and they've got people coming in from Europe, and in a lot of European countries, they're great at managing conflict. They put it out there. It might be embellished, might be loud voices. And I've got some Canadians and Americans are like, whoa, what's going on here? It's a nice culture. We're not used to that. And we don't know how to manage that, for example.
Yeah. So
Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
We deal with a lot of perspectives, and everything is multiplied with the amount of people in a team. And chasing these perspectives, I think, is really interesting when people say, you know how it is. Yeah, from your angle, yeah. So yeah. Okay, there are some more challenge. There are some sort of global challenges that we've seen also in our meeting with the teams we do. So we're all in what is called since many years the VUCA environment, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, which there's another word coming in now, BANI. Some of you heard it?
Brittle, anxious. What's the N and the I now?
Non-linear and incomprehensible. So, basically what it's saying, it's shaky out there. Nothing is, really obvious. We were just waiting. And so you can see there's a bit of hesitation in the world. and also a bit of push. So how to manage when you have so many things to take into consideration. So there's not only the global perspectives and the global leadership at this time, it's also managing expectations of the different stakeholders and understanding who are the stakeholders for our team, who do we need to watch out for. And also running the operations of a business and transforming it at the same time. That's a polarity you need to manage as well, doing both. Many members, and we have one of our clients actually who said, do you have team coaching for people who are not in only one team or who are changing teams now and then? So that's a tricky one, right? Complexity and interconnectedness of organizations. Yeah, what are the networks that we need to manage as team leaders and as teams? And working within system as a system ourselves, from the system I am as a person to the system I work in, and it's the bigger system I have to take into consideration. And of course, need to understand how what we do actually have some effect in the long term for the teams we work with. So there's a lot of things that leaders and leadership teams have to understand and to work with. Those are big challenges. There's also challenges within the teams, right, Michelle?
Yeah, and before we jump there, I'm just curious. I'd love to hear from some others. How many of you are experiencing this need to demonstrate this ROI on your development? And that's becoming more and more critical, especially with larger organizations. And one of the things that we can position is that the return on investment for leadership development when you're working with a team is actually and can be much more effective than just working by providing one-on-one coaching. And so it depends on what the needs are within the system, but there's definitely more of a demand to demonstrate proof with qualitative and quantitative metrics. And hence why we're going to share with you at the end of the session some case studies and actually share with you how we're doing pre and post coaching measurement. And I think, one of the other things too is, and I just saw Nick put it into the chat as well. And this might be more of a challenge within a team, but certainly when we're looking at, online versus face-to-face. And so there's always challenges and people have different perspectives as to what is more effective and when should we do face-to-face versus virtual. And so I think Peter, Julie, and I would all agree, if you're doing team coaching, ideally it's great to start and end the whole journey face-to-face. You can have very effective team coaching sessions virtually in between. But again, since COVID, for example, a lot of organizations are less willing to fly teams together to be physically present, to have everything done face-to-face. And there's also value in having shorter sessions virtually as well, which gives the team an opportunity to work on their business goals in between sessions. So Peter, as you said, what are those challenges within teams? So managing conflict in a productive way. Conflict is good. We need conflict for innovation. However, we don't often have the skill sets to manage that in a productive way. And so conflict emerges within teams, and it shows up in particular with team members having diverse viewpoints, but not being able to ask questions to understand one another's viewpoints, and they make assumptions. And when we start making assumptions, as Pauline was talking about, working with the neurodiversity, that's where we start getting into trouble because we're not truly understanding and listening and communicating effectively with one another. Psychological safety and trust is showing up more and more on teams. It didn't used to be one of the top 5 factors, but Peter, I'm sure you're seeing it as well in your teams. And I think there's partly an awareness that didn't exist before, as well as an expression of, do we actually have the container, the safe space within which to hold conversations and to encourage those diverse viewpoints and to encourage people to share what it is that, they're finding challenging, or to share, even just put up their hand and ask a question, or to challenge someone's perspective. And so this is an area that we can help, a team work with. Certainly communications. I don't know any team. Anyone here ever been on a team where communications wasn't an issue? Raise your hand. It's always an ongoing concern, and it can be as basic as, how do we give effective, positive, and constructive feedback to one another? And so we can teach you role models and conversational feedback models. And we could even have your team practice it in real play, as we call it, to learn that. Communications could even be something as simple as effective meeting practices. Again, I don't know any team that actually says, yeah, we're really good at that. And, most of the times it ends up being just even simple process check-ins to ensure that, we're managing our agendas well, that we actually aren't getting caught up in cycles of discussion and not being productive with our time. Checking in to make sure, do we have everyone at the same level of understanding? If not, maybe we should go off and have people, meet separately rather than taking up the entire team's time. Decision making is another critical category. This always shows up in one of the top 5 team performance indicators. And decision making, one of the things we love to do is actually observe a time where a team has to make a real business decision in live time so that we can give them feedback as they're doing it. We can coach them on it. We can give them a decision making model to follow. And of course, this one came up from the group earlier on in our chat session, clear roles and accountability. And so when we're looking at clear roles and accountability, a lot of people are confused as to, first of all, when can I make a decision versus my manager? When does the team make a decision versus when I make a decision? How do we hold ourselves accountable as a team? And that's a big issue because someone can be an effective leader and absolutely be really good at holding an individual accountable. That's way easier than trying to hold an entire team accountable for its performance. And then in that regard, we often don't have the structures and organizations that help hold a team accountable. Julie, I know you get to work with a lot of leaders, and so I'd love your perspective too, because oftentimes when we have reward systems or we have performance pay, it goes for individual performance as opposed to team performance. Very few organizations have a balanced scorecard. And so I'm curious, do you see this happening in your organizations where leaders struggle with holding their teams accountable?
Yes, I do. And oftentimes I'm working with individual leaders as they work with their teams. They're fumbling in terms of how to facilitate the meeting so that they get equal participation, for example, and so that they stay on schedule and et cetera, et cetera. So we work with some really basic team facilitation skills. And also there's a need on their part often to give feedback, and they find it, I just had a session this morning on that, and they find it very difficult to do. And so we work through how to deliver that, how to prepare for the feedback, how to deliver it, and how to, right after it, you need to switch gears from giving to being very alert to what happens next and how they react to the feedback, and then work out what are we going to do moving forward.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so
Well,
that's,
and I love,
it's interesting that all levels, this transcend levels, this
yeah.
need to learn this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your Leaders Coach program because it gives an opportunity for individuals to learn these skills, to practice them. And so an effective team doesn't happen just because of the leader. An effective team happens because of the dynamics amongst the individuals on the team. And are they working together collectively? In other words, is the team leader holding them accountable as a team to meet the business and stakeholder needs as well? And so, Peter, I know this is an area that we often get called in because, and clear accountability often resides on having clear roles. First of all, are people really clear on what it is they have to do? Have they been set up for success? Do they have the necessary training or skills, to be able to deliver? Peter, do you want to add a few comments on that?
Yeah, I think I saw Julie want to say something first, so go ahead, Julie.
All right. Well, I'm also coaching people who are members of teams, and they see the team meeting dysfunctional, and they don't know what to do about it. For example, you've got the long-winded person who's taking up most of the time, and you want to hear from other people. So I developed a model for when things go wrong, how you can intervene in a successful way. So it's notice, name, navigate. So first you notice that John's been talking too long and Mary and Sue haven't had a chance to talk. Then you name it, you find an appropriate way to name it. I noticed that we only have 10 minutes left, and I really want to let her hear from these other two people. I suggest we pass the microphone over now. So that's the navigate, the proposing. And so you're not the leader, you're not the facilitator, but you still can intervene. And probably you have a bunch of people in the room that are relieved that you did this because it's bothering them too.
So you need to remind them of the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking?
Ooh, nice.
No,
Love it.
it's following Michelle. It's also accountability is about early warning signals as well. You know, to say that yes, I have this, but I need support because there are things coming in my way. So to be fully accountable on my part, I need to address back to the team saying I need support. And not everyone does that. I've seen it today also. So we need to have an open discussion on how can we be mutual accountable really so that we can support that process. I also want to add one short thing on the online and the face-to-face structures. In the early aftermaths of COVID-19, there was a lot of hybrid teams. Some people were at work and some were at home, and you had these strange meetings where it was very hard for us as team coaches to see to that we got all people in the discussion. And the teams were not always helping to bring in the people who were online. So, and even in one time, it ended up because I spoken to the leader the evening before the meeting, and then she got COVID. So nobody wanted to be in the room with me as I had been sitting close to her. So we ended up me being alone in a conference room in a hotel where 6 people were in their individual rooms, and we had 4 people online from another country. So that was a very strange thing that happened.
Oof.
And the hybrid teams might work for some, but for team coaching, it's one of the more difficult parts. So I agree with what Michelle said. Start, if you can start and finish, and maybe have in the middle face-to-face sessions, because online sessions we're missing the dimension of what's happening between the other people. Here, I can see you face to face, but I don't see how you interact, and that's a
Yes.
major thing that we need to work with in teams.
Yeah, and I think if we do go virtual, we also have to be really intentional and role model for leaders of teams to be intentional around creating connection, doing those check-ins at the beginning of the section, building relationships, making sure that we take time to really support the overall development of the team. And so, for example, if you're doing virtual, there's a couple of key rules of thumb. I remember having a global bank and they wanted me to come into Toronto, sit in their corporate head office. So I was in a boardroom with 10 people there, and this was a very large team. And then there was 2 people online on the phone, and then there was 2 people calling in from the Vancouver office and 2 people calling in from the London, England office. So 3 screens, and I'm like, oh, where do I sit? Because that's going to change the power dynamics too, right? And then I'm like, okay, there's people on the phone. I don't want to forget that. So I'm like making tent cards, put their name on the table. So I remember they're calling in and we got to check in with them. And so what we realize is that ideally, Peter, what you just described, having people show up on individual cameras is much more effective because you can actually promote the dynamics
Yes.
amongst the team members and see them better than if you have people in clusters in, boardroom meeting rooms, for example. So just a tip for everyone out there to organize it that way. Let's hear from our audience. What are some of the other challenges that you're experiencing? What have you found that's worked well? Pauline, please.
Well, actually, something that didn't work very well. I was speaking with a client this morning, and she really wants to speak up more in their team meetings. And so she initially said she wanted to work on her public speaking skills. But as we talked, it became more apparent she wanted to become more assertive. And then I asked her if they had agreed on their ways of working within the team and how they, set up their meetings and if everybody got a fair time to speak. And as soon as I started mentioning all those things, she was like, no, I think I'll just go with the flow. And so it was culturally not appropriate, she felt, to even ask for these things. So her homework was now to think about what her needs are to be able to feel more comfortable to speak up. But she said, no, actually other people, it's just not done that I ask for these things. So apparently they never
Oh.
set up their ways of working, and I felt that was a big miss.
Oh, totally agree. In
Mm.
fact, a lot of teams don't do that because we don't spend enough time focusing on process. Most teams jump to the tasks, they jump to achieving the goals. And when we don't sit there and intentionally say, what are our ways of working with each other, also known as team agreements, team norms, designing an alliance, we're not setting up the behavioral ways in which we can work well together. And when we set up those team agreements, it also gives us an opportunity just to pause the process, call a T for timeout, and without naming anybody, just being able to say, oh, not sure we're honoring our agreements of making sure we're hearing from everyone. And so unless you have a very skilled facilitative leader who has different techniques, such as making sure they go around the room to hear from everyone, encouraging people to write down information and reflect first before contributing, doing brain writing versus brainstorming, for example. We're not going to hear all of those diverse perspectives. And so that's, another key thing to think about. So thanks, Pauline. So important.
Yeah. We got a comment also from Jair here, time and cost pressure from higher management.
Oh, never face that. Never, ever, ever. It's always the first thing that shows up. Well, you don't have time for team coaching, first of all. They got to get going on their goals. No, it always shows up, right? It's a polarity to manage. And for us as team coaches, that can be a challenge too, because we often have to influence the internal leaders to influence the business stakeholders to get the buy-in to even do team coaching, right? Or if you're internal, it often depends on your ability to actually influence the leader to get the buy-in from the stakeholder. And then the nicest way to address that, and I think the most effective way, is to really share that we're going to be coaching the team on the business while they're working in the business. And it's not about doing something over and above all of their other goals. It is making sure that we spend the time. So for example, my earlier description of coaching the team while they're making a decision. So take a real business decision that has to be done. Spend that time in the team coaching session, giving them feedback. Teams don't get feedback. So if we can reflect back to them what we're seeing them do, what we're hearing them say, what tools they may or may not be using, and we can encourage them by asking, really thoughtful questions to think about how they're interacting together while they're doing their work, they're actually going to incorporate these small mindset and behavioral shifts and become much more effective. And that's a real challenge. And a lot of leaders have never experienced team coaching. And hence it's difficult for them to buy into the concept. So I often relate it to executive coaching because a lot more people have had one-on-one coaching, and describing the process similar to that, because if you can relate it to something they already know, you're going to get greater buy-in then too. And I'm add one more comment. I'll turn it over to Peter. The other way I often turn this around is, what would it cost if your star performer left on the team? How much would it cost to have a headhunter agency work with you to recruit someone, to bring them on board, to get them up to speed? And that often is much higher, believe it or not, than the cost of investing in team coaching.
Well, I even had it worse, so to speak. Not being a coach, but more being one of the global sales managers in this question, having brilliant team members, and one of them has had a burnout already, and at that moment was balancing on the second one. So how to keep that guy on board without burning him off during the process? And one of the topics was, hey, this guy's alone. There's a huge workload. I need more hands. And the feedback was, we are cost cutting, so make it work only with that guy. And I went even up to HR and said, hey, listen, I'm done with this because I cannot move around because this guy is on the verge of collapsing again. And I'm not getting any help. So that was a very interesting discussion. And in the end, other things happened. I was forced to move around and eventually to leave. But I received a message that currently this former team member is at home, getting into the same process of burnout as he had before. So they are back at square one, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your challenges. And unfortunately, that's more common than we would like to see in organizations. And that does not contribute well for the individual's well-being, nor the team's, nor the organization's well-being in the end. And we often see burnout. We see this when teams are really focused on working on achieving those business goals, and they don't have time to even just pause, slow down, have those conversations with each other, to even support one another, to
Mm.
even take vacation days, for example, and other healthier measures, right? So yeah, Peter, do you want to add into this? Because this is such a common thing happening in
Yeah,
so many.
I mean, as you already said, in some words, that what is the cost in time if you don't do this? What are the negative consequences? So we need to talk
Mhm.
about consequences of our decisions.
Yeah.
So that's my comment on that. I also saw Nick is asking for clarification between facilitation and team coaching. My easy answer is facilitation is like shorter term, one day, facilitate a discussion about strategy, see to that all the voices in the system are heard, and getting down to some clarity of what to do. But then, so that's more focused on the what to do, whereas team coaching is more on how to be when we do these things, how to secure accountability, how to look at long-term consequences of our decisions. So it's a bit deeper and longer process, I would say. That would be the easy description. You are also, as a team coach, doing all the others. So you're sometimes facilitating as well. So it's basically it's summed up in team coaching. I hope that's supported. Shall we, for the respective time, Michelle, go into a couple of cases? Would you
I
start?
think that would be wonderful. Absolutely. So let's take a look. So I'll share an example here that, and this was actually one of my very first team coaching situations about 15 years ago. And so I was called in because essentially the senior leadership communications team within a very, very large municipal government here in Canada was struggling. They had burnout. People were looking to resign, but people didn't resign because they had a pension plan that they were attached to and was quite significant. They had a change in leader. I think it was in 4 years, they had 3 leaders. They had tried leadership 360s, leadership training, leadership offsites. They weren't performing well at all. But imagine this, a leadership communication team where their services weren't being utilized internal in the organization, which is their whole purpose for being. It turned out that line managers were actually outsourcing the work because they didn't want to deal with the communications team internally. So they were willing to pay more in order to get their services done. But more importantly, communications is always a centralized operation in an organization for many reasons. So this was a team that was really what we might call at the low, if we're looking at a team matrix, if we want to look at positivity and productivity, very low on both. And this is often when we get called into teams, isn't it, Peter? I don't know about you. When's the last time you got called into a higher performing team that wanted to improve? Usually we get called when there's big challenges. So there was lots of conflict on this team. There was silos in this team. It had recently merged with an IT team as well. And so they hadn't worked out how they were going to work together. So this was a team, if you want to take a look at the left polar diagram here, and let me explain basically what this is, and then that way you'll understand Peter's example more clearly too. Essentially, this was using the team diagnostic assessment from Team Coaching International, and they measure effectiveness amongst teams across 14 factors, 7 positivity factors, which range from, camaraderie, communication, constructive interaction, values, diversity. So this is all about creating the team culture. And then on the other side of the polar diagram, you'll see that we have 7 productivity factors. So for example, how well does the team make decisions? Do they take initiative, and are they proactive? How do they hold each other accountable? What are their goals and strategies? So when we look at this, we do an assessment with the team. And so the team actually completes the online assessment to give itself its own data. And the data came back looking like this. If you take a look at the original scores, they had, as you can see, an ideal score would be closer to the outside of the circle, to the 9. but this team had scores of like just around 4, for example, around respect. They were very, very low on constructive interaction. They didn't have much hope or optimism. And then, as you can see, when we worked with them over a period of a year, their scores magnified incredibly. In fact, there was up to 68% improvement in some of these scores. So just take a look at respect, for example, how much that increased, so from a score of 4 to well over 7, about 7.5 out of 9, which is significant. If we take a look at optimism, again, a score that was like, I think just around 3.5 being increased to just under 8. If we take a look at their ability for team leadership, and team leadership isn't just necessarily the team leader themselves. It might be how well do they support each other. Do they have facilitative leadership where they step in to different roles, for example? So, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to be vulnerable. This was a really interesting case because you remember we were talking about those team agreements, Pauline? Well, I come in and the very first coaching session, we're looking at developing team agreements, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're taking forever to do this. Like I'm talking 5 times longer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? How is this not working? And then it hit me. This is a communications team. And of course, every word is significant for them. So they couldn't decide whether they had the agreements, but they couldn't decide in the next session whether they wanted to call it a team contract or a team norm or team agreements. And I just sat back and I watched them, and how a team does one thing is how they do everything, as we say, Peter. And this was them. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't actually have meaningful dialogue. They couldn't understand each other's assumptions. They couldn't handle conflict productively. In the end, as you can see as well, supported by another type of visual diagram, the team matrix position on the right-hand side, you will see here, this is about where the team started off. So you'll see the large brown square across what we call 4 dimensions of team worlds. And so when you take a look, people were all over the place, but significantly, they were in what we call the low productivity, low positivity, and then the high productivity, low positivity. So this comes back to Jerry, your comment that bottom red square is all about burnout because there's not enough resources or people aren't taking time or aren't enabled to make time to develop the relationships and focus on how we're going to work together well. You can see by the nice white square that the team essentially in the end, they transferred into the top blue quadrant, which is where we want them to be, which is around having high positivity and high productivity. Did this come at a cost? Yes, actually. And were there any change in team members? Well, this was done over the course of a year. So there was a new team member brought in, and I did support the leader in performance coaching. And then in the end, one team member was encouraged to leave. And so those things sometimes happen as well to affect our dynamics. But a very, very incredible story of a team that was almost like just totally dysfunctional. They also had a transformational service delivery goal that they had to achieve. So I'm really proud of them because they did achieve that service delivery goal. More importantly, when they looked at the stakeholder feedback, the internal leaders were starting to use them again. And so they were able to redevelop those relationships. They managed working across silos within their own team. So just an incredible success story. And I'll take it down for a moment just to see if there's any comments or questions or.
How
Is
often
the time
did you
frame
meet?
discussed? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please, Jane, and then I'll go to Jared's
How
comment.
often did you meet with them, Michelle? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So it was one day up front, whereby in that day they developed their team purpose, their team agreements. They looked at their future desired state. We obviously had opportunities for them to go through the data, and there's 5 layers of data on the team diagnostic report. There was a number of very experiential coaching exercises, intentional exercises to encourage them to build relationships in a positive way. And then we met once a month for 2 hours and this was the initial 6 months, once a month for 2 hours over that. And then they redid the team diagnostic to see where their progress was at. And I have to admit, when you have a leader, and Julie, I'm sure you can relate to this, when you have an exceptional leader who's very skilled and very invested in developing a high performing team and who has those skills of understanding it, it can make all the difference. But there was a time even when this leader, and honestly, her background was in social work. So she had a lot of the same skills we have as coaches, actually. She even became less optimistic, less hopeful about the team. And so we introduced an exercise called a wall of pride. And interestingly enough, the rest of the team buoyed her. And because they were putting down of all the positive changes that had been happening. And so this was, and this, we had those typical 2-hour coaching sessions. I think in total, there was 9 of them because obviously there was vacation breaks over Christmas and summer holidays. And then we pull the team back together to share the redeployed results and to also transition and talk about how they're going to be sustainable as a team once the team coaching ends. Does that help answer your question there, Jane?
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I see we had a question, Jer. What was your comment? Let me just see. I need to scroll down. Is the time frame discussed up front? Great question. And so I think this is really important. And this was my aha moment. I've worked with teams for well over 30 years. But what became interesting to me was 15 years ago or so when I realized, when I heard about team coaching, I'm like, this makes more sense. We're talking about pitching up front with a team, that it's going to be a minimum investment, say of 6 months time, right? As opposed to doing team retreats or one-offs or things like that. And the other thing that made sense to me is we have a minimum period of time, we have a regular cadence of team coaching meetings, we're going to be able to have sustainable changes in behavior because as a team coach, we're regularly there to help the team hold itself accountable to itself as well, just like you are in one-on-one coaching. And so it's important to discuss that time frame. It's also important to say this is not going to be easy work. This is going to be hard work. And not only are you going to be working on the business, but you're also going to be working on your internal team dynamics. And it's not going to be easy. And so I always pitch it as a 6-month minimum program. Okay. And then I actually share with people, the cost frame for an additional 3 sessions, because truthfully, if we really want to have long-term effective work, sometimes working with a team can easily be 9 to 12 months or more, because this is also culture change that we're talking about as well. And especially if you're looking at the larger systems within which they work.
Super. Well, thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. I know Peter has a case study as well. How about if we take a look at that?
Yeah, very briefly, we can do that. I just want to say that the time frame is important. Many team leaders come to us and ask for a trial. And sometimes they think that's enough. They don't understand that they need to work over this time. Otherwise, as I usually say, it's like going to the gym once and hope for muscles. So it doesn't really work. So this team, the other team here in picture, was a team that was already high performing, especially from their own view. And we challenged them to see, so this is all you can do. And when they did their assessment, the outcome was, again, here a bit different than the one that Michelle had, which had a greater leap. But it's about what happens when you work with the assessment. This team also improved. They went from really good to great, and we challenged them to say, what would it take to get to your next level? And even though they improved in smaller bits, they improved the whole system. And as you can see in the circle or the polar diagram, the circle is rounder, which means if you put this wheel rolling, it will be a smoother ride. So they even out the spikes and valleys we can see sometimes. They were very happy, but also by understanding that we're doing an assessment. We also discussed this in the ICF group. Is it important? Maybe not, but if you use them, use a team assessment. Don't use individual grouped assessment. It doesn't measure the same thing. And if you do it, do a second assessment so you can measure the gap and the growth of the team. This is one way to measure ROI. In this team, they were known later on as the leaders of teamwork in their organization, which is a global telecom organization. So even small changes can have big effect. in the organizations.
Super, thank you. Well, how about if we take a look, I'm managing time here, why team coaching is the future, and it is an industry that is increasing in frequency, big time. We see that in the market.
Yeah.
Michelle? Or,
Yeah, well, I
either
think,
way.
the complexity of organizations is requesting and demanding new ways of developing not only individuals, but teams to become more effective. And we know that people operate in teams and they're members of multiple teams. And one-to-one coaching isn't always as effective as it could be, because you might only be working with a couple of members. And we all know you put a number of smart people on a team doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work well together. And we also know too that we're going to need to develop these skills as, like Julie's program leaders, as coach, so that they can develop better skills to support teams to better improve their own performance. And we also want team members themselves to improve their skills as well in terms of collective performance. And then those members are also potential leaders in the organization of teams in the future as well. And we also see too that there is a shift in some organizations from one-to-one coaching towards coaching that develops and supports a coaching culture within teams and across organizations. And we also are seeing too that in some organizations, they're customizing and developing their own apps, or there's coach bots out there. And now we've also got supplemental AI coaching. And to some degree, this may or may not replace, the role of the team coach. And so the role of the individual coach. And so this is challenging. So how do we do this? When we have the complexity of team coaching, there isn't going to be the same. You can't replace team coaching with a bot, for example, because you need to be able to see all of the interdynamics. And you also need to look at the structures. Do you have the right people on the team? Is the organization supporting it with the right processes, etc.? I'll turn it over to Peter.
Yeah, I just want to note that Nick asked about dependency, and I think you addressed this in a way. We talk about interdependency. The teams need to discuss what happens with the different dependencies that are in play, and if it actually works for them. So anything that we notice, we need to mirror it back to the team. That's our role, is to be the mirror.
Mhm.
And the champions, when we see it, and not the cheerleaders, but champions and challengers, because there are sometimes a lot of set understandings that they think they have. This is how it is. And we might see other things that we want to share back to them. So they need to
Super.
understand how they work as one system. You are interdependent, especially if you see the team as a hand, where the fingers are the members. If this team want to do something, it has to work together, and they're all in need of each other. That's why many things can be solved underneath the table, I call it, before you sit at the leadership table. The cross-fertilization between leaders, learning from each other, teaching each other, listen to each other's perspective, will support the understanding of how we can work with a more interdependent.
I love that. I
So,
love that.
yeah.
I'm cognizant of time here, and I think it would be really interesting if each of you would put in a key learning that you've gotten from today's session. It will really encourage us to offer more webinars like this. And while you're doing that, I suggest we put the last slide up, because you may want to reach out to one of us and we can give you our contact details. But let's get those key learnings there. So Michelle, can you go to the last slide? Thank you. So let's see what comes in. I see people busy typing, love it.
Thanks, Nick.
Yes.
Good
The
review
reminder-
of prior team coaching, wonderful. A
Mhm.
reminder for everyone to be on their own screen during an online session. Yeah, taking the understanding of facilitation of teams to longer term development and coaching of teams.
And I want to add to this to Nick, there is on ICF's webpage, you can look for team coaching core competences. You will have this matrix, and I believe also some explanation of the work behind.
Yeah,
Had to
just
pick one.
yeah, some other ones coming in here too. Hard to pick just one, but the cost of burnout and team coaching can be much more cost effective for sure. And another one, the WAIT acronym that Peter shared with you. And reminder how important it is to spend more time on the ways of working instead of jumping into the tasks directly and the information around team dynamics. So fantastic, some great learnings there.
Very good. Cool.
Wonderful. Okay, well, why don't we go to the slide just before the end, and I'll bring some closure to this here. So we will have another webinar coming up. We've referenced several times the Leader as Coach program that we offer. It's been super popular. We have several programs going on at the same time, and leaders repeatedly say, Julie, I'm so grateful for this program. It's been life-changing for me. And that's the kind of work we want to do. So thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, Michelle and Peter. Thank you, Lisa, for supporting in the background. And I wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, evening,